Welcome to the On Your Side podcast. I'm Gary Harper.
And I'm Susan Campbell. Spring break season is here, and it's time to get away.
Or is it? There's still pent-up travel demand, but there's also persistent inflation making vacationing somewhat unaffordable.
Today, we're chatting with Chris Elliott. He's a travel columnist, and we're going to talk about spring break trends and some insider travel tips to snag the best last-minute deals.
This is On Your Side with Susan Campbell and Gary Harper, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.
Welcome to the On Your Side podcast. I'm Gary Harper.
And I'm Susan Campbell.
It's about that time. I'm ready for a vacation.
Dreaming of someplace sunny?
Yeah.
Sunnier than Arizona?
It's almost kind of like mandatory for my wife and I. Whenever we go somewhere, it almost has to be like a beach getaway.
Yeah, for sure.
You know?
Do you have a favorite beach?
Love Florida beaches.
Okay.
And love Mexican beaches, too.
All right.
So, have you been to Mexico before?
I haven't. Not to Mexico, but
Wow.
I've been to a lot of other beaches.
Even Rocky Point?
Not even there.
You know, that's 4.5 hour drive.
I know, it's a quick drive.
It's a quick drive.
I know, but I have my whole in-law family lives in California, Southern California, so
okay,
that's our easy drive to the beach.
Easy beach getaway.
Mm-hmm.
I got you. Do you have a vacation planned yet? You and I kind of talked about this last week on the podcast, but
No spring break.
Yeah.
Spring break is going to be a little low-key around our house.
that might be a good idea because it's spring break. Everybody wants to go somewhere, and everyone's back to vacationing now.
Yeah,
So
lots of pent-up demand.
I want to go to Harrisburg. My son's up there, so I'm going to see if I can get a flight up there.
That's not a typical spring break location. You might be good.
I think I might be good. Yeah, I probably go into Detroit because nobody goes there, so that's good. And then hop over to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
You've got your route.
So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about vacationing. We've got Chris Elliott. He's a travel columnist. You know a thing or two about traveling around, right, Chris?
I do.
Yeah.
I do a lot of travel myself.
And
Not so much for spring break, though.
tell us where you're at now and why are you there?
I am in Brisbane, Australia, and I'm here on it's a 3-year project. I'm traveling all around the world and writing about the recovery from the pandemic and how tourism is doing. And it's been about 1.5 years. I started off in Azores in the Portuguese islands, and then kind of worked my way out east until I got here. So I'm in Asia Pacific this entire year.
Have you been over to New Zealand at all?
New Zealand is next. I want to get there for the winter and maybe do a little skiing in June or July.
Yeah, I hear it's beautiful over there.
Sounds like a dream job. Do you need an assistant?
Come on over. Yeah.
That's amazing. This is not quite the topic of the podcast. We want to jump into spring break travel, but what have you found for how areas are recovering from the pandemic in the travels that you've done so far?
Well, really well, actually. I mean, when I started off, it was the middle of Omicron. And I actually ended up going to South Africa, which is where Omicron all started. And there was no one there. So I had the whole country to myself, which was great. But some countries have been, very, very vigilant about it. I would say the Gulf states like Qatar and United Arab Emirates, they have these little apps that do contact tracing, and everyone had to carry them everywhere. You couldn't get into a mall without showing a negative test result. And then some are kind of loosey-goosey. I probably shouldn't name any names, but there are some Southern European countries where it just didn't matter and they didn't care if the virus spread or not. But thank goodness that's all over now, right?
Well, we hope it is, and it's funny that you brought that up because, we're consumer advocates and we try to help consumers who have a problem, and I'm currently working on a situation where a couple spent $25,000 on a cruise to Australia, and the cruise company never told them that they had to have COVID shots or they couldn't come. So, and they have a health situation where they can't get the COVID shots. But, $25,000, and they were going to keep all the money. They haven't updated their website about the COVID requirements since 2018. so nobody knows this.
A little bit behind.
I kind of bring that up because are we over this now? Are there a lot of mandates out there that you have to have your COVID vaccine before you come to my country or you get on my ship or you get on my plane? What's the latest with that?
There are some countries that are still taking it very seriously, and I'll just give an example. Spain, for instance, you still have to have masks through March. You have to wear masks on a plane and in mass transit if you're traveling to or from Spain or if you're inside Spain. But other most of the other places, it's really, for all intents and purposes, it's over. You still do have to show some vaccine, certificates before you enter the country. But it's not like, when you think of a lockdown, you think of maybe China where there's this quarantine and you have to wait a couple of days to get in. And that's all kind of behind us already.
So there is a lot of pent-up demand for travel. People are feeling like, let's get out there, let's do this. But then we're also dealing with inflation right now, where the inflationary pressure is just pummeling people's budgets. And they're going, gosh, I really do want to go, but I also cannot afford the extra, couple $1,000s it's going to be for my family to go on a modest vacation. What are you seeing in the trends for spring break? Is inflation actually impacting people?
Or do people care?
Well, yeah, that's actually a really good point. Do people care? I think, yes, it's impacting people, but no, people don't care. I mean, it's been like 3 years since a lot of people have taken a spring break vacation. And especially if you have kids, you have that one window that you can only go for a week. People are saying, to heck with it, I'll just go. And this year is the year I like to call it the year of the Farcation, where people just want to get out of Dodge as far away as possible. So what we're seeing is this trend of people booking a lot of international flights to faraway places, not so much for spring break, but for summer. People are just trying to get as far away as possible. And actually, I was in Perth, Australia, which is, if you're familiar with the term antipode, it's about as far away from the United States as you possibly can get. And a lot of Americans want to go to places like that because they want to get as far away as possible. And, Perth is a place that is about as far away as possible from the United States as possible.
That fits the bill.
Yeah, I never heard of it. Where else are people going to that's kind of like off the charts and really not really frequently visited?
Pretty much anywhere. Like Asia Pacific is a really good example. There's been a lot of interest in New Zealand and Australia. Also places like Japan. Japan just opened up, and then China definitely, because people haven't been able to go to China for what seems like years. So that's where people want to go to. Whether or not they actually make it there is another issue. As you mentioned, inflation is a big thing, and tickets are expensive.
But people are willing to spend the money, you think, or not?
I think people want to be able to spend the money. Another kind of disturbing trend, and I'm sure you guys are following this as consumer advocates, is people going into debt. We had the numbers from the New York Fed last week where we're like in a record amount of credit card debt. People are actually going into debt to go on vacation because they haven't gone somewhere for so long. That's a little bit troubling to me because as much as I love travel, I don't want you to go bankrupt trying to go somewhere.
Are there certain areas that you might be able to beat inflation a little bit, where my dollar stretches a little bit further and I can get a little more bang for my buck?
Yeah, I mean, you were talking about Mexico before. That's always a good destination to make your dollar stretch a little more. South America, I was just in Argentina a couple of weeks ago, and there, your dollar is going to go much farther than it would if you were in the States. And I would have recommended Turkey, but they've had that little earthquake there, and maybe not the best time to visit. But I was in Turkey about a year ago, and wow, your dollar goes a long, long way. Plus, it's a beautiful destination. So once they've cleaned up after the earthquake, go to Turkey.
Yeah, my son just got back from Buenos Aires and Chile, and he says his money went far down there.
It does. It's amazing. The economy down there is not doing so well, and so our dollar is much stronger. I don't know how much longer that will last because I've been reading about the dollar potentially weakening, but for now, it's definitely a good place to go.
Yeah, you also found out that you have to go to Western Union to get an even better currency exchange than somewhere else. I mean, I don't travel that much internationally, so it's good food for thought. I mean,
yeah,
you get more money, bang for your buck, as you say.
Absolutely.
Hey, we got a spring break coming up. So, what about domestically? Any places that you would recommend at this late stage of seeing that's not going to be overly crowded or hard to get into?
Well, it's a little bit late for that actually, because a lot of the good places are already taken. But you were talking about Florida. That's always a safe bet. Florida used to have a little bit of a reputation as a place where everyone from college went on spring break, but there are a lot of very family-friendly places. I used to live in Orlando, and a lot of people came during February and March to Orlando. But you guys have so many great places right where you are. I mean, many people go to Arizona for spring break and for spring training. And so if you really want to save some money, you can do a staycation, maybe drive up to Sedona, do some hiking. You can even almost do a day trip to LA if you wanted to. I mean, it's kind of long, but it's, you can still save some money by not going too far.
How about some other kind of insider travel tips if you do want to save some money or make the most of this upcoming spring break? Maybe, inflation did cancel the big plan and it's not going to be a Disneyland kind of spring break, but we still want to do something. Do you have any of those insider travel tips that might help us make the most of it?
Well, as a consumer advocate, I usually help people when something has gone terribly wrong. And so I can talk a lot about that and some of the insider tips that I've gotten. One of the big problems people run into at this time of year is they try to get a deal that's really too good to be true. They try to book, say, a vacation rental that ends up not being a real vacation rental. And so they end up losing a lot of money. So my first piece of advice would be that if it's something that looks too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. So watch out for scammy vacation rentals for sure. A lot of people just try to, they say, well, I'm going to save some money on accommodations and get a rental like that. They end up finding a place that looks perfect and the owner says, well, why don't you wire me the money? Which is a total red flag. You don't want to be able, I'm sure you guys all know this, but maybe to the listeners and viewers out there is if someone says wire the money, that's definitely a red flag and don't do that.
You know how many times we've done that story where people, and they just, unfortunately, bless their heart, they just want to get away and they wire the money and it's gone. Oh boy. I don't know why they do it.
And also Zelle, again, I know that you guys have done a lot on Zelle, I'm sure, but Zelle is a big problem right now where once the money is gone, the bank is not going to stand behind it. In some rare cases, you can hold a bank's feet to the fire and say, hey, refund this customer. But most of the time when you transfer money through Zelle, it's gone. Even if you'd send it to the wrong person. I had a case the other day where someone missed the digit by 1 and sent it to the wrong person and money is gone,
Yeah.
So, and then you're just relying on that person's, having a good heart and making sure that they make it and kind of do their own investigating to figure out where was this money supposed to go.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the problem with Zelle too is that everyone is so on their guard now is that if someone does email me or send me money through Zelle accidentally, I'm going to think it's a scam too, and I'm just going to ignore it, right?
Right.
So everyone's really paranoid about that.
Well, you kind of need to be. Yeah, that's, like Susan was saying, once it's sent, it's gone. Hey, are people still going to California for spring break? Or is that kind of like transitioned down?
Oh, California, it's been really rough. You've had the rainstorms there. And so a lot of the really nice touristy areas in Northern California are a little washed out and still repairing. But it's still a very popular destination as far as I can tell. And people are still going. I think that it's really for you guys, it's one of the closest, it's probably not the closest, but one of the closest beach destinations that you can go to. So if you really need a beach, the Southern California beaches are really going to be your best bet, but a little pricey, as you noticed, as you noted before. It's not like Mexico, and Southern California can be really expensive. So if you've got inflation worries, maybe skip that.
I used to take really good family vacations with my wife and our 2 boys, and we stayed in some really nice places, La Jolla, really upscale type places. If I want to go back there like now, it's way out of my price range.
I was going to say, I guess I need to renegotiate my contract. But you qualified it. Okay.
Everything is so high today. Yeah. I'm glad I got to experience it, back then, say 15 years ago. Now, if I try to get into those same places, they're still very, very luxurious and nice. But they're way out of my price range.
Yeah, you have to shorten the vacation by a couple of days if you want to spend the same money.
Yeah, exactly. So
So you had mentioned, I mean, let's forget about the scammy kind of things. Let's say somebody ends up with a legitimate vacation. They go somewhere, but everything kind of goes wrong. We don't like the accommodations. We don't, things aren't going well, or we can't go and use the ticket we were supposed to for some event. What are some of the other things that you encounter that are maybe common and that people can learn from?
Well, there are so many things that can go wrong. And I just wanted to answer your question from before about California. You're right, it's really expensive, but Central California, that would be my insider tip. Anything north of Santa Barbara, you can really get something that's more affordable. Solvang is so beautiful anyway, but you don't have to give up on California. Don't give up. California is beautiful. But yes, so much can go wrong. I mean, from the minute that you leave your home, I mean, let's start with the ride to the airport. A lot of people will park their car in the driveway and then take an Uber. And sometimes the Uber will not show up that you've ordered, and you'll miss your flight. So one of the first things that I'd say is, if you are flying, is give yourself extra time, even more time than you normally would. Around spring break, people just assume, well, I can show up to the airport an hour before my flight and I'll make it. That's not a valid assumption when you have, in some cases, lines of people around the block waiting to get in to check into their flight. So, don't take any chances. Give yourself some extra time. Download a movie or a book or something like that, or tune into your show. Download the podcast.
I love that advice.
You're waiting.
Excellent advice.
Yeah.
Shameless plug.
The one tip that I can give, and I'm glad I really experienced this, I went with the TSA pre-check, and it's in and out. You don't have to wait through all those long lines, because a lot of people, they don't travel that much, so they don't want to spend the $80. But I'm telling you, I mean, even if you fly just like 2 or 3 times a year, it's worth the $80. And a lot of the credit cards, they reimburse you if you put the $80 fee on that credit card. Yeah, they'll give you the $80 back. But that's a tip I always tell consumers is go get your TSA pre-check.
I don't have a pre-check, but I do use the reservation system that Sky Harbor has. So anytime you're flying through Sky Harbor, you can say, my party of 4 is going to be showing up at 12 at noon. And we would like to go through security then. So you have a separate line at Sky Harbor where you go. It's kind of like a pre-check line, but it's next to the pre-check line.
Really?
And they are expecting you, and you kind of skip the general boarding line.
Now, what is this called? This is a little nugget that I've never heard of before.
I think it's just called PHX Reserve.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's cool.
It sounds great if you have kids like, 2 small kids like you.
Exactly.
Is that common at other airports?
Yeah, this is something I've only seen really at Sky Harbor. It's a great feature, and no, I mean, I think other airports should probably do it. The other thing about flying, now that we're on the subject of flying, is that if you're flying with kids, is that your airline, if you haven't flown in a while, your airline may ask you to pay a seat reservation fee for your children, and that is a huge topic of conversation right now in Washington. It's considered a junk fee. And you may find yourself separated from your young kids if you're flying somewhere. And the thing to remember about that is that airlines have said publicly that if they see a family with young children, that they will do everything they can to seat them together. But as of now, you can't get free seats. So if you want to get an assignment, you still will have to pay for it. And that was, if you saw the State of the Union address, actually the president was talking about making it a law that you can't do that for families with young kids.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of ridiculous that you have to pay extra to sit together.
United actually just announced that they're going to start making it easier when you're initially doing the booking process. So if you're flying with kids 12 and under, you're going to see more seats available when you're going through the booking. Because they're trying to start to address that issue, because it is a problem. I mean, for my family, I don't pay extra for my seats. I'm flying with a 4-year-old and a 1.5-year-old who's a lap infant. So, still.
Right.
And my husband. And so whenever we go fly somewhere, we walk up to the gate agent and we say, here we are. we would really, really like to sit together. And I think that the other passengers on the plane would like that also.
Right.
And generally they're able to kind of work things out. One time it didn't happen, and I was with my 4-year-old and my husband was with our 1.5-year-old, and it was fine. And we reunited at the end of the flight. And it was all fine.
Yep.
But I just refuse to pay that junk fee. I refuse.
You know, you got to bring some items too, like some M&Ms or some candy bars to bribe the gate agent.
Is that how that works?
Hey, listen, it can't go wrong with it.
I don't think that's one of the official tips.
That's the Harper tip.
Okay.
Okay. Why not?
Yikes.
What else you got?
What else do I have?
Yeah.
Well, I think
you now.
I think I've just told everybody that they don't want to be on a plane with my family.
Your kids are probably well behaved, but 1.5, you probably, acts up every once in a while.
My last flight with my children was a disaster. It was the biggest disaster in the world, and it had nothing to do with anything that the airline did wrong or anything. Grandma gave my son a lot of goodies in a bag without telling me.
Oh.
And
well, that's why she's grandma.
I was flying without my husband, so it was just me and the 2 kids.
Yeah.
And my son got into the entire thing of goodies without me realizing it.
Yeah.
And his stomach was not happy about so many sweets.
Well,
it was awful.
Good for grandma for being a grandma.
Sure.
But I guess
I was not super happy.
Grandma should have said something to you. Oh boy. What do you got, Todd?
Hey, real quick. Is there something down the road where airline prices are going to come down, or is it a lack of planes, pilots, and fuel costs along with demand? Is that going to continue on? Or are we going to see the high prices that we're seeing right now next year, a year, 5 years down the road?
Well, right now we're seeing airline prices, the ticket prices, at least for domestic fares, going up as they usually do at this time of year. And but it's not as bad as it was last year. So what we normally see is a normal price increase just after spring for the summer tickets, and then just as the summer travel season starts, the prices will start to come right back down, and then in the fall they'll really start to come down. So you can get a really good deal like in September and October and early November. So this year is not quite as bad as last year. Still, if you are looking to book a summer airline ticket somewhere, it's better to do it sooner than later. And the reason why is that a lot of those tickets are starting to sell out. So I'm working on a story right now for one of my news outlets, and people are saying, yeah, if you want a reasonably priced ticket for August, you should book in March. So 6 months in advance.
Hey,
wow.
Fact or fiction? There is a good day and worse days to book, or is it maybe to fly? In other words, to get the best airfare, you should. Is it the booking day, or is it the date that you choose to fly that you usually get a cheaper rate? Like I've always heard, like fly Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Is that true, or is that a myth?
Yeah, there's so many urban legends about when the best time is to book and the best time to fly. So it's 2 separate issues, right? Best time to book. Well, let's talk about best time to fly first. Best time to fly is always, you want to avoid the business travelers, and the business travelers are usually flying out on a Monday, coming back on a Friday. So midweek is a really good time to fly. And you can actually go and see, if you go to Google Flights, which is one of my favorite search engines for air travel, you can see the trend line where it goes up on a Monday and then it goes back down on Tuesday and Wednesday, and then it goes back up Thursday and Friday. So if you can plan your trip around that, that's really good. And those are typically the patterns. They're not always the pattern, it just depends. Sometimes there are holidays that come up, but that's usually the way it is. In terms of when to book, I have read so many stories and talked to so many people about this issue, because they say, well, the airfares get loaded in midnight on a Tuesday. And so if you go midnight on a Tuesday, you can get a really cheap airfare. The best advice that I've heard is book when you're ready to book an airline ticket. That's just it. This is not a game that you should be playing, because think about it. You're setting an alarm for, midnight Eastern time to go and look at airfares. It's just not worth it if you have a busy life. Just book when you're ready.
I like it.
Sounds good. Listen, Chris Elliott, thanks so much for joining us on the On Your Side podcast. If people want to know more about you or maybe read some of your columns or anything, what are your websites, social media platforms? Just pitch them out there for us.
Yeah, I run a nonprofit consumer advocacy website where we help people for free. So if you have a problem with anything, not just air travel or our travel, we would be happy to help you. I have a team of volunteers. And that's elliottadvocacy.org. So all one word, elliottadvocacy.org. And it's with 2 L's and 2 T's. I also have a consumer news site called Elliott Report, which is elliott.org, ELLIOTT.org. And I'm on social media too.
All right. Sounds good. Listen, I always enjoy talking about vacation because it kind of gets me revved up. Like
you dream a little bit.
Now I want to go somewhere, but then I don't want to open my wallet. So
you're going to stick here in Arizona.
I'm still going to Pennsylvania though.
All right.
All right. Hey, listen, Chris, thanks again. Appreciate you joining us on the On Your Side podcast.
No problem.
The On Your Side podcast is produced by Brad Denny. Our audio engineer and editor is Todd Martin. Segment producer is Colin Stanton. And I'm Gary Harper.
And I'm Susan Campbell. If you have a problem you can't resolve, maybe we can. Send us a message through azfamily.com or our AZ Family mobile app. Look for the On Your Side section and leave us a message. Thanks so much for listening to the On Your Side podcast. And if you like it, leave us a review. We'll see you next week.
On Your Side is on Good Morning Arizona every weekday morning at 6:45 and 7 o'clock, and every weekday evening on Good Evening Arizona at 4 and 5 o'clock. You can also catch it on Arizona's Family News at 9 on 3TV every weeknight.